The anime begins by showing a woman holding her baby son in the pouring rain. The woman, who looked exhausted, then tried to find a place to take shelter and hide from a group of people who were chasing her. In her desperation, the woman then entrusted her baby son to the mistress of the house, and then just left. However, the woman never returned to pick up her baby son until 18 years had passed since then, and the baby son, named Lu Shu, had now grown up. That night, when Lu Shu was visiting the fireworks festival with his sister, Lu Saoyu, he overheard some people talking about people who had superpowers. Lu Shu did not necessarily believe the news that was going viral, because according to him, there was no one with superpowers in this world. However, when he and Saoyu watched the fire magic show performed by a man on the stage, Lu Shu felt a strange radiant energy emanating from the necklace his mother had given him. He then assumed that the man wasn't doing magic tricks, but rather had superpowers to control fire. Out of curiosity, Lu Shu then sneaked backstage with his sister, and how shocked they were when they saw a group of people dressed in black ambush the firebending man and then shoot the man with stun guns. However, they soon discovered Lu Shu and Saoyu, so Lu Shu found an excuse so they wouldn't be suspected. Even though he and his sister were let go in the end, the leader of the group seemed to still suspect Lu Shu. Likewise, Lu Shu suspected they were not the police as they told him. Lu Shu and Saoyu then met a young man named Ji Wei who asked about what happened backstage. However, Lu Shu did not respond and immediately left him. Although Lu Shu thought of Saoyu as his little sister, in reality they were not related by blood. Lu Shu and Saoyu, who are orphans, meet at an orphanage run by a woman who met Lu Shu's mother 18 years ago. As a child, Lu Shu was often bullied by other children, and Saoyu was the only child who cared about him. Because of this, Lu Shu loved Saoyu very much and considered her his younger sister. Even after Lu Shu left the orphanage to live independently, Saoyu also came with him. As he was about to cross the street to buy noodles, the lost Lu Shu didn't notice that a vehicle was speeding toward him. He couldn't avoid the collision and fell to the ground, covered in blood. However, the accident made the necklace his mother gave him react, and miraculously, Lu Shu felt no pain at all and then got up as if nothing had happened. He thought he might have superpowers because he had survived the deadly accident. Covered in blood, Lu Shu rushed home and realized that something had happened to him. He then asked Saoyu to cook the noodles while cleaning himself up. Inside the room, Lu Shu was trying to find out what had happened to him and was very surprised when he realized that something on his left hand was emitting a golden glow. When Lu Shu touched it, a golden screen magically appeared in front of him, showing the points he had accumulated when accidentally scaring people on the way back home. Lu Shu immediately realized he had superpowers, where the more often he made others show negative emotions, the more points he would get. After that, a kind of lucky spin the wheel game appeared on the screen, where he then tried his luck with the points he had. Even though he had failed to get the prize several times and his points were almost gone, Lu Shu finally managed to get a very rare gift, where he felt a very powerful force seeping into his body. Not long after, Lu Shu, who witnessed the news of a fire at a location near his house, then took the initiative to go to the roof and see what really happened because he had a strange feeling. When he climbed the roof, Lu Shu saw several men walking along the roofs of people's houses. As they approached, Lu Shu realized they were the same person who had knocked out the firebending man backstage. Lu Shu then went into hiding, but one of them noticed his presence, so Lu Shu was finally caught. Lu Shu then tricked them by saying that he would pick up radishes that were drying on the roof of his house. Since Lu Shu was carrying a basket filled with radishes, they didn't even suspect him. However, after they left and Lu Shu returned to the house, suddenly, there was the sound of something falling from the roof. When Lu Shu and Saoyu checked outside, it turned out that the one who had fallen earlier was the firebending man who was probably trying to escape. Knowing that the man was only pretending to be unconscious, Lu Shu purposely irritated him so that he would gain a lot of points from the man's negative emotions. Annoyed that Lu Shu kept playing with him, the man then used firepower to burn Lu Shu's arm. But strangely, the power of the fire did not work on Lu Shu at all, as if he could neutralize it. The man looked surprised that his strength didn't work on Lu Shu. Because his efforts were in vain, the man finally left there just like that. After that, Lu Shu returned to the room, and his physical strength increased drastically after eating the magic pill on the golden screen that appeared before him. Because his life was very poor, Lu Shu tried to make ends meet and pay his school fees by selling food. Even though he had to sell before going to school, Lu Shu never felt ashamed of his friends who often passed by where he was selling. When one of the students at his school was about to mock him for being so poor that he had to sell, Lu Shu purposely irritated the young man so he could earn many points. While at school, Lu Shu is shocked by an incident that shocks the school, where a student named Li Qi attacks a teacher after his powers are awakened. In such a precarious situation, Lu Shu had instead thought of a way to cause negative emotions from the many people there. With his ingenuity, he was finally able to stop Li Qi and gain many points from the negative emotions of the people gathered there. One of his classmates, a girl named Ling Ling, then praised Lu Shu's ingenuity, although in the end Lu Shu got a lot of points from Ling Ling's negative emotions. After that, Lu Shu and the rest of his classmates had to be willing to have their blood samples taken to see if their powers were also awakened. When he returned home, Lu Shu tried to cure Saoyu with the healing pills he got from the lucky spin the wheel. Lu Shu finally got the healing pill after doing gacha several times and then gave it to Saoyu. After drinking it, Saoyu finally recovered quickly and returned to normal health. The next day at school, the students are shocked by the results of a blood sample test, in which Lu Shu becomes one of those whose powers are awakened. It didn't stop there because many other students had their powers awakened. The school then formed a special class for them and appointed a man named Sifei as the class supervisor. Lu Shu looked surprised when he saw Sifei, because that man was the one who hunted the firebending man. After that, Lu Shu's class had a transfer student named Zhang Shui who turned out to be awakened, and would enter a special class. Even though he was very beautiful and his skin was so smooth, Shui turned out to be a man. In the evening, Lu Shu and the disciples, whose powers had been awakened, gathered at a place where they would conduct further tests to determine their level of strength, which were classified alphabetically, where A level was the highest level. After doing the test, Lu Shu turned out to be at level F, or the lowest level. This then made him a target for bullying, but he didn't mind it because he managed to make many people feel irritated with him, which would be more profitable for him. Lu Shu finally showed his super strength to his sister, started doing gacha, and got an item. However, the item was absorbed into Saoyu's body, making her super strength awakened. Lu Shu then thought that this power was destined for Saoyu. After that, Lu Shu met his neighbor, an old man, who was practicing swordsmanship. The old man offered to teach Lu Shu, but he immediately refused his offer, leaving the old man just like that. As time went on, Lu Shu went about his activities as usual, selling, going to school, and collecting points from the negative emotions of those around him. One day, Lu Shu got a magic sword after doing gacha. However, he had absolutely no idea how to use the sword. Thanks to information from Shui, Lu Shu finally discovered that Sifei was a member of the World Network Organization. The organization above them was the Heavenly Network, with less than 10 members, which meant that they were extremely powerful people. That night, Lu Shu noticed the presence of Heavenly Network Organization members visiting the old man who was left next to him. The old man named Li turned out to be one of the highly respected higher-ups of the Heavenly Network. After knowing this, Lu Shu finally accepted Master Li's offer, and began to practice swordsmanship with the old man. After Lu Shu mastered several advanced swordsmanship techniques, Master Li then advised him to use his power to protect and save others. However, Lu Shu turns out to only care about his sister and wants to always protect her because Saoyu is the most precious person to him. One day, one of Master Li's best disciples, a man named Sie Shujin, came to Master Li and invited him to rejoin the Heavenly Network and teamed up to explore a ruin. However, Master Li refused because he didn't want to mess around with Heavenly Network's affairs after deciding to retire. That night, Lu Shu and Saoyu did a test to determine their strength level, where Saoyu's strength turned out to be A level, and Lu Shu's true strength was unmeasurable. However, Lu Shu decided to hide his power because he didn't want to cause trouble. After that, Lu Shu and Saoyu started to test each other's strengths and seemed amazed by their superpowers. Shortly afterward, Lu Shu and Saoyu then rushed to the location of the big explosion, where the explosion was caused by a fight between the Earth Network and a group that had a fairly high level of super strength and was dangerous. Lu Shu and Saoyu seemed to be watching the fight from a distance. After learning a little about their strength, Lu Shu confidently launched an attack to test his strength. It turned out that he could easily defeat all of them, including Sifei and the Earth Network, who attacked him for considering him as part of the group. Because of the dark aura that enveloped him, Sifei and the others couldn't recognize Lu Shu, so he had more freedom in his actions. After that, Lu Shu took Saoyu to a place where she then used her power to collect the energy of a dead person. On the other hand, Shujin was having a meeting with members of the Heavenly Network and Earth Network organizations, where they discussed Lu Shu and his immense power. Unable to identify his identity or his level of strength, they considered Lu Shu the most dangerous threat. After that, Lu Shu went back to selling as usual. Since his merchandise was always sold out lately, Lu Shu thought that he might be able to buy a house with this income. That night, Lu Shu was surprised by Saoyu, who managed to resurrect the dead man's spirit. In fact, she can find out the past of the person, who turned out to be a gang of robbers. Xiaoyu told Lu Shu that the gang of robbers had hidden their stolen money somewhere. Xiaoyu then invited Lu Shu to take the money. However, Lu Shu didn't want to, because the money didn't belong to them. Even so, he appreciated Xiaoyu's good intentions, who wanted to use the money to buy a house. Lu Shu then advised Xiaoyu not to use her power anywhere or show it to others, as it could jeopardize their safety. At school, Shui told Lu Shu that people whose powers were awakened were starting to appear a lot. However, at the same time, there is a mysterious place with immense spiritual power called the Blessed Land. Shui added that the price would skyrocket whatever came from the Blessed Land. Hearing this, Lu Shu seemed interested in going there. After that, all the disciples gathered in the field to attend the welcoming ceremony for their new principal, a man named Li Xiao. Upon meeting the man, Lu Shu immediately realized that the man had a high level of power and was a member of the Heavenly Network organization. That evening, Li Xiao also tutored a special class, where he suggested that students train hard and join the Heavenly Network someday. Li Xiao then played the video footage of the Heavenly Network's battle some time ago, in which Lu Shu had secretly taken part. Li Xiao then asked the disciples to be careful of this mysterious man who possessed immense spiritual power, who managed to escape before the Heavenly Network caught him. After that, the disciples distributed philosopher's stones that could increase their spiritual strength. However, Lu Shu intended to sell the stone instead. Since the enchanted stone would be very expensive if it were sold on the black market, he entrusted his possession of the stone to Shui to sell and considered him as his best friend for helping him. Long story short, Lu Shu returned home and gave Xiaoyu a cell phone. Not only that, but he also informed her that they might soon buy the house they had been living in. Hearing this, Xiaoyu seemed happy and hugged her brother. Lu Shu then increased his power level with the points he had accumulated so far. Shortly afterward, Lu Shu received a notification that all the special class students would be on a mission to protect the area around the ruins, the location of the emergence of tremendous spiritual energy. Since the Heavenly Network and the officials in charge have not been able to determine how much spiritual power there is, and the dangers that threaten it, the disciples were asked to monitor and protect the area around the ruins. Once there, Sifei made it clear to the disciples to keep their mission a secret from others, and if anyone leaked the secret mission, then that person would be tried by the military tribunal. Since being around the ruins could increase their spiritual strength, disciples were also required to practice. Lu Shu, who had a unique way of training, then took advantage of the opportunity to irritate his friend, a young man named Liu Li, so that he could accumulate many points and increase his strength. Lu Shu was very happy to prank Liu Li because he was always irritated with him, and gave Lu Shu a lot of points with his negative emotions. Elsewhere, Xiaoyu seemed worried about her brother, who couldn't be contacted by phone because there was no signal. After a few days of being there and annoying Liu Li all night long, Lu Shu finally earned many points, which he then used to increase his strength, making him immune to anything. Liu Li, who underestimated Lu Shu for only having level F strength, then challenged him to an arm wrestling fight with him. However, Lu Shu could easily defeat him, even in a matter of seconds. Sifei, who saw this, then challenged Lu Shu to arm wrestling with him. After feeling Lu Shu's physical strength that was able to beat him in arm wrestling, Sifei then praised Lu Shu, and said he had good potential in the future. Not long after, suddenly, a thick fog appeared that led to the place quickly. The mist turned out to be a portal that could transfer everyone in its path into the ruins region. Everyone panicked while running away so as not to be trapped in the fog. Lu Shu and Shui also tried to escape from there. However, the two separated, and Lu Shu ended up trapped into the ruins realm. There, Lu Shu was attacked by several terrifying undead and defeated them all. He then met a group of people who were also attacked by a swarm of zombies, and then helped them. However, since those people didn't help him when he was attacked by the zombies, Lu Shu angrily left them. Lu Shu then explored the place to find out what really happened there. After defeating several zombies and picking up their swords, he saw a light flare shot into the air and rushed towards it. The flare's light turned out to be from a young man named Chang Huanyi, who was a spy from another country. Chang tried to run away from there, but Lu Shu followed him because he was suspicious of him. Chang tried to kill Lu Shu at every opportunity but always failed. Lu Shu and Chang finally fought, and Lu Shu seemed overwhelmed by Chang in close combat. However, Lu Shu finally defeated Chang after using his ultimate move. Lu Shu then continued his journey until he finally arrived at a forest. Lu Shu, who was hungry, finally found a very fruitful apple tree. Without thinking, he then took some apples but immediately met resistance from a flock of squirrels who were there because they thought he had stolen their food. Lu Shu immediately ran away when the squirrels threw stones at him. Towards evening, Lu Shu decided to rest while eating his apple. He realized he had circled the ruins because he had run quite a distance but found no one. Knowing that the only way to get out of the ruins was to find the spiritual power core at the center of the ruins, Lu Shu planned to return to his original place. However, Lu Shu instead encountered a pack of hungry wolves with a fairly high level of strength. Because it was impossible to defeat them all, he finally rushed to escape from the pursuit of the wolves. Being inside the ruins can indeed increase his strength, not only his spiritual strength but also his physical strength. Lu Shu then managed to avoid the pursuit of the wolves who were far behind, and finally returned to his original place where the group of people he had saved was still there. They all looked amazed that Lu Shu was still alive after facing the swarms of zombies behind the hill. Not only that, but Lu Shu was also completely unharmed, despite having a low level of strength. One of them then begged Lu Shu to stay and protect them. But again, he refused, saying he would only spend the night there and continue his journey the next day. On the next day, Lu Shu finally continued his journey. However, the demon horse army suddenly blocked Lu Shu, who immediately threw arrows at him. Lu Shu managed to dodge their attacks and hid in a safe place. On the other hand, the members of the Earth Network organization were observing the demon horse troop from a distance. Since they failed to kill the leader of the demon cavalry army, now they are having a hard time because the army has actually increased in size. Meanwhile, Lu Shu turns out to be hiding behind a hill, where he then ambushes the demon army and fights alone. Long story short, Lu Shu defeated the demon army and took all their weapons, which amazed everyone because to defeat the demon army, at least level C strength was needed. But Lu Shu, who had F level strength, could defeat them alone without even the slightest scratch. Lu Shu then peddled the spears and other weapons he got from the demon army and sold them to the members of the Earth Network and Heavenly Network organizations, as well as other disciples. After that, they also cooperate towards the core of the ruins so that they can get out of there. In the evening, Lu Shu and the others decided to rest. He then gave the apple he had picked up in the forest and gave it to the network members because they had worked hard, even willing to sacrifice their lives to protect the disciples. However, Lu Shu set a pretty high price if the disciples wanted the apple. Despite being considered a selfish, mercenary person, he seemed relaxed and replied to their words by saying that all of them had never experienced hardship in their lives or become poor. After that, Lu Shu and the others were confronted by a mass of spirits of the dead that surrounded them. He tried hard to keep the spiritual sword from escaping from within his body because he didn't want to show his power to everyone there. However, the spirits of the dead who were about to attack seemed frightened when they saw Lu Shu's spiritual power, so they immediately fled from there. After continuing their journey, Lu Shu and his companions finally arrived at the center of the ruins, where a large hole and a group of people had been there first. Seeing so many people there, Lu Shu took the opportunity to return to selling. Besides Lu Shu, it turns out that there is a girl named Chao Qinxi who can also defeat the demon army without any effort. Lu Shu and Chao Qinxi were then summoned by the Heavenly Network members because their strength stood out from the rest. The Heavenly Network checked the depth of the hole, which turned out to be quite deep and contained another large hole with much greater spiritual power. While the Heavenly Network members were strategizing, Lu Shu decided to take a break, realizing that there were 9 spies among them. However, he did not know the exact appearance of the spies. Lu Shu finally reunited with Shui, who was said to be able to defeat the 4 demon horsemen alone. After eating the apple the principal gave them, they all decided to sleep and rest before entering the big hole. However, when they were all asleep, Lu Shu noticed that a group of people had sneaked into the hole first, which turned out to be spies. Lu Shu managed to stop one of them and then shouted to wake everyone up. However, before he could interrogate the person to dig up information, suddenly the principal came and immediately beat the man down, which made Lu Shu feel suspicious of the principal. Long story short, Lu Shu and the others finally got into the big hole and followed a path that led them to a magnificent palace guarded by an army of demons. A fierce battle between the network members against the demon army was inevitable. Chao Qinxi showed extraordinary abilities when fighting against the demon army, while Lu Shu seemed relaxed because the demon army realized his terrifying power and chose to avoid it. Not getting any significant resistance from the demon army, Lu Shu decided to sneak into the palace, hoping to find the precious ruins treasure. When Lu Shu entered a room he believed to be where the treasure was, he had to face off with several demon warriors guarding the place. However, just as they were about to attack him, the spiritual sword inside Lu Shu's body suddenly appeared, making them all shudder in fear, then returning to their defensive stance. Meanwhile, outside the palace, everyone seemed overwhelmed by the demon army that was so hard to beat. Even the principal with the highest power level seemed overwhelmed when fighting the demon army leader. In their desperation to defeat the demon army and get out of the ruins, Lu Shu apparently managed to find the treasure, which was also the core of the ruins, so that all of them were finally able to return to where they came from and the mist finally dissipated. After that, all the injured people were immediately treated, and all the items they took from within the ruins had to be handed over to the Heavenly Network. On the other hand, Shui looked panicked while searching for Lu Shu's whereabouts because he was nowhere to be found. Shui thought that Lu Shu did not survive and disappeared into nothingness. But then, Lu Shu finally appeared and handed over the 5 spears he took from the demon army. After that, Lu Shu rushed home because he was very worried about Saoyu's condition. Not long after that, Lu Shu finally met his little sister, who missed him so much because she had been waiting for his return for so long. The ruins' treasures possessed extremely formidable spiritual power, so anyone who possessed them could use God-level spiritual power anytime and anywhere. Not only that, the treasure in the form of a golden seal turned out to be an infinite storage space, in which a door led to the magnificent palace that was previously in the ruins. Meanwhile elsewhere, Xie Sujin and his subordinate, a man named Nie Ting, were discussing the last seconds that happened at the center of the ruins before someone took the gold seal and brought everyone back with the power of the golden seal. Until now, the principal and Heavenly Network were still investigating who the person who had taken the golden seal was. Since the golden seal possessed God-level spiritual power, Nie Ting ordered all his men to report immediately if they discovered any unusual spiritual power appearances. Judging that the principal's performance and his special class were deemed unfavorable, Xie Sujin then ordered Nie Ting to supervise the 2 most outstanding students in the special class, namely Chao Qinzi and Lu Shu. Since Chao Qinzi had A-level spiritual strength, Xie Sujin asked them to focus more on monitoring her development because she had great potential in the future. The moral we can learn from this anime is never to underestimate someone who looks weak, because true strength does not come from physical toughness or great talent, but from a strong determination to protect and make loved ones happy.